Glad you're with us. It's The Verdict. Mick Cornett and Kent Myers are here each week talking to interesting people about topical issues, and that's certainly the case this week. It's no more important than the water we drink or the air that we breathe. Indeed. A lot of talk about the environment nowadays with Al Gore, Vice President Al Gore winning an Academy Award for his documentary on environmental matters, including global warming. And we are going to bring today to our audience the number one person in Oklahoma that knows most about it and is in charge of trying to do something about it, Miles Tolbert, the Secretary of the Environment. Should be a good show. Miles Tolbert, Secretary of Environment, State of Oklahoma, today's guest on The Verdict. Stay with us.
For Chesapeake Energy, every day is game day. A chance to outperform the field and win again. Winning consistently demands the kind of leadership we see in the Hornets' Chris Paul, a champion whose respect for the game and his team has produced one of pro basketball's brightest new stars. At Chesapeake, we know leadership starts with a generous heart as well as the will to win. It's taking responsibility for more than personal success. It's building teams that perform as one. In natural gas exploration, winning demands leaders who develop strong teams in the company and in the community. And always, the purpose of victory is prosperity for our fellow citizens and our communities. We've learned each win is earned as a team, and Chris Paul proves it every time he plays. Chesapeake, American Energy wins the day.
There's a whole new world online, but it's not always safe for kids. That's why your parents and teachers set clear rules, when to go online and how to protect yourself on the internet. It's the safe way for kids, right gang?
Right, be safe online.
Thanks to Lauren Nelson and Cox, we're working to keep Oklahoma kids safer online. For your free guide, log on now. And if you feel your child has been placed in danger by someone online, notify law enforcement today.
Oh, hi. I know you guys said I'd save with Cox Digital Telephone. Well, my bill came and... Could this be right?
With Cox, there's no waiting for the other shoe to drop. The only surprise is there's no surprise at all.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest. Once again, we're pleased to welcome Miles Tolbert to the show. Miles is the Secretary of the Environment for the state of Oklahoma, appointed to that post in 2003. He's an Oklahoma City native. He did his undergraduate work at Stanford University, his law work at Harvard Law School. He practiced law with the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. for a while, has also been a lawyer on staff of the Attorney General's office. He also was with me practicing law for a little while, not long enough as far as I'm concerned, and then he got lured away to become Secretary of the Environment. He has a great deal of experience in this area. He's a very busy guy. We appreciate him coming to join us while the legislature is in session. It's kind of a dangerous thing to walk away from the Capitol when the legislature's in session. Miles, welcome back for your second visit to The Verdict.
Thanks, it's great to be back.
You know, I don't want to assume that everyone understands the issue involving Tar Creek, but in general, in the far northeastern section of Oklahoma, through decades and decades of coal mining and related activities up there, they've created huge environmental issues. So much so that people are having to be evacuated, for lack of a better term. What's the latest? What can people learn about Tar Creek in 2007?
Well, what's happening right now is we are, in fact, evacuating people as you speak. There have been two rounds of this effort. The first round took place about 3 years ago. Governor Henry proposed and the legislature approved a relocation of every family there with small children, 6 years old and younger, because of the danger that the lead there was posing to the development, the neurological development of these kids. And that was a very successful effort. We moved 51 families for just over $3 million, which is in the world of buying people out and relocating families, that was a very efficient process. What happened next was that in January of last year, the Army Corps of Engineers reported that the area under Tar Creek was dangerously undermined. This was an area, this whole area was, there was coal mining, there was lead mining, there was zinc mining, and it did a tremendous business for a long period of time, and there were lots of companies that did very well. What happened was the mines began to play out. And as they played out, you had sort of marginal operators that came in. And the marginal operators were looking around for the good ore. And the only good ore left was in the columns that held up the ceilings in these mines. And so they would shave the pillars and shave them, in some cases remove them entirely. And so the result is it's a very dangerous place to live. It's a place where there's a real chance that the ground beneath your feet is going to give way. And so with the assistance of Senator Inhofe, we've procured federal funding to start moving out essentially everybody in the towns of Pitcher and Carton, which are the two towns most affected.
Just in general, is a coal mine 50 feet deep, 500 feet deep, 5,000 feet deep? What type of depths are we talking about there?
And most of the mines that are in the core area are lead and zinc mines, and they're about more like 500 feet deep. And there's no danger that you're going to fall down 500 feet, but the truth is that if the earth subsides just 20 feet, if you're in the house when that happens, you're in serious trouble.
Yeah, right.
Well, what size area geographically are we talking about? You named Pitcher and Carton,
right.
but as far as square miles covered by this?
Well, the Superfund site itself is 40 square miles, and we're talking about an area that's smaller than that whole site, but encompasses about 1,800 people, is the number of people who are affected.
Have there been documented cases of children, in fact, being impaired because of the lead exposure?
Well, it is a sad tale. I mean, it's a place where the schools are very dedicated to their kids, and you see it in everybody who's working there. But the last figures I saw were that 40% of the children in the elementary school there did not go through the ordinary state testing because of their learning impairments.
Wow, 40%.
That's right.
Well, where are we on the process? I mean, are we 50% finished? Are we 80% finished?
We have funding now for about half of the buyout, and there's hopefully more coming, more federal money coming to complete it. We are in the middle of appraising people's property. We have, at this point, for the second phase of the buyout, this phase that's driven by the danger of subsidence, we've not yet moved anybody out. We would expect that would start happening in June of this year.
Are there other spots in Oklahoma that have similar issues? All I ever hear about is Tar Creek.
Well, Tar Creek is no question the worst of the worst. In fact, when the Environmental Protection Agency in the early 80s made a list of the worst Superfund sites in the country, the worst hazardous waste sites in the country, we had the distinction of being number one for Tar Creek. There are 14 other Superfund sites throughout the state, and a fair number of them are here in Oklahoma City, as you know. And there's nothing that's as bad as Tar Creek, but there are a lot of other sites. One of the things about those sites, and one of the ways it impacts, your viewers, is that even if they're not so bad that you have to move people out, even if it's not so bad that you're going to have to put a fence up around and declare it off limits for long periods of time, it eats a hole in the middle of the city. I mean, there are maybe 4 Superfund sites in sort of central Oklahoma City that have meant that we haven't been able to get the kind of redevelopment we'd like to get because it's so easier just to go on the edge of town and rebuild and build new construction instead of focusing on the core of the city.
What's your view on the role of government in those specific areas? Obviously, this is a project too large for municipal government to handle in these small towns. State government has a little more resources, but it seems to me like this is such a large problem that the federal government needed to be called in. But how do you weigh that as Secretary of Environment? What is the role of the branches of government?
Well, there's no question that problems of this scale have to have at least a federal component, and mostly that's driven and needs to be driven financially. The state just did not have the financial resources to tackle the larger Superfund sites. But the key policy decisions need to be made on a more local basis because we're closer to the problems. And so in Tar Creek, for example, in trying to decide the order that people will be moved out, the priorities that we're going to give to the different classes of people who live in this area, that's being decided by a local group, a group of 9 trust members, most of whom live right there because they know the ins and outs of the situation and they're much closer to the problem than we are.
Once everybody's moved out, the site is empty,
Yes.
then what's going to happen to it?
Well, that's a very good question, and the truth is there's not a good answer to that yet. The thing that will definitely happen to it is we will make certain that it gets cleaned up. I'm a little concerned that there are some people out there who think that we can move everyone out, then put up a fence around it and write it off. But we have 75 million tons of lead waste that need to be addressed. And the worst of that is probably going to be combined in some smaller area where it could be better looked after. But the larger amounts are going to need to be moved out to a location offsite. We've got surface water problems that may improve over time, but there's no good answer for. So frankly, what we're doing right now is we're focusing on moving people out of harm's way to give us more time to figure out the right way to solve the problem.
1 minute left in this segment.
Yes.
Are you at all involved with the drought that's taking place in Oklahoma?
We are. You know, this drought, which has been with us now for nearly 2 years, is remarkable for its intensity, and there are a number of small towns that are starting to suffer because their water supplies are going dry. One of my agencies, the Water Resources Board, provides emergency grants to those communities, as well as tries to work on solutions longer term to improve their water supplies.
So where are we on that? Are we coming out of it? It seems to me that 2007 is a little bit wetter than 2006. Am I wrong about that?
You know, you're absolutely right. And so that's a hopeful sign. When you talk to the climatologists, they'll say that the drought will end, and then there'll be another one. And that's all you get out of them.
All right. Miles Tolbert is our guest. He's the Secretary of Environment for the state of Oklahoma. We'll be back with more with Miles right after this.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
Shining is taking responsibility. At Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Oklahoma, we know managing your health care can be overwhelming, and it's our job to help you meet the challenge. By guiding, supporting, and showing the way, we encourage you to gain control. Because we believe the best tool we can give you is the confidence to take charge. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Oklahoma, shining through.
That land next door was a mess. Take more than a lawnmower to revive that land. I heard the oil and natural gas people was cleaning up old oil sites, and it wouldn't cost us a plug nickel. Oh yes, sir, it was quite a revival. The whole church showed up, want to make a playground for the kids. It sure is a blessing.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
He's gonna score. Come on, baby. Come on, baby. Come on.
Go, go!
Satellite go out again?
Yeah, rain.
But this is just as fun.
Don't live in satellite denial. Get the reliability you expect from Cox, your friend in the digital age.
Not sure where you're headed? NATS can help you find your way. It's the National Athletic Testing System. We call it NATS. You'll call it your launching pad to success. NATS will give you a standardized evaluation that will help you measure your performance and give that information to college coaches so they can accurately evaluate your potential. NATS also helps with academic support. Join with the Oklahoma High School Football Coaches Association and head for success at www.nats.us.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Kent and Mick Cornett visiting with Miles Tolbert.
Let's talk about global warming a little bit. We did a show a while back with David Caroli from the Severe Storms Lab in Norman, who spoke about global warming and its reality. He talked in that show about the science that supports the view that global warming is indeed happening. Of course, we have heard many times the controversy about whether the global warming science is valid or is junk science. Kind of depends on who you talk to, I guess. But what's your view about that?
Well, Ken, as you mentioned earlier, I'm a lawyer, and so my training is not a scientific training. And so the way I've resolved it for myself is you need to look at the people whose opinions you respect, people who you can turn to evaluate it scientifically. And I think you look at it and you have this group, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that thinks it's happening and that to some degree or another we are causing it. The National Academy of Sciences, the same way. And the President Bush, in his State of the Union address, and the President has access to much better science and science advice than I do. He sees this global warming as a serious challenge. And then last week, I had the pleasure of having lunch with local meteorologist Gary England, who says he's convinced that global warming is occurring, though he's not quite certain what's causing it. All of this leads me to believe that the Earth is getting warmer, and that's going to have an impact on us, and we need to see what we can do about it.
I think people wouldn't be quite as suspicious if there wasn't so much darn money involved in global warming. There's government grants coming to scientists who want to study it. Seems to be more on that side than if you were opposing it. And then you have, if we are going to go to alternative forms of energy, if we are going to cut down on CO2, then all sorts of new industries that will have to spring up as a reaction to it. So I think that's part of the reason. There's great change is going to have to take place in our habits. And with change, comes cost and political environment issues. So, I would love for us all to reach a consensus. I'm just not sure how realistic that is. Now, are you involved in the global warming aspects as far as the state of Oklahoma is concerned? What's going on at your office?
Well, I think the thing that and to respond to your point is that what we can do is the steps that we can take to address global warming are steps that are good to take regardless, and that's a lot of the things that my office is involved in. We are working, the governor announced in his State of the State address a $40 million biofuels project for the state to try to make the state a leader in biologically based motor fuels. Now, that capitalizes on things we're good at. We know a lot about fuels in this state. We know a lot about growing crops. And development of biofuels is going to be good to address global warming concerns, but it also will be good for improving the rural economy, and it will also be good for reducing our dependence on foreign oil. Same thing goes for things like wind energy. That you've been out in western Oklahoma and you've seen those wind farms. Every one of those turbines is money in some rancher's pocket because of the leases for that land. And every one of those turbines is that much less air pollution going into the air, cleaner air for us. And of course, every one of those turbines represents a step towards addressing our carbon footprint. So I think a lot of the things that we would do, almost everything that we would do to address global warming are things that there are good reasons to do independent of global warming.
And your office is involved in what way?
We have been involved in the biofuels efforts to try to get approval this session for the legislature. And Kent mentioned earlier that it was a little dangerous for me to be out of the Capitol today because these things are moving as we speak. But the Secretary of Energy and I are working to make that happen. It looks likely to happen.
Let me go back to the junk science, valid science question. It seems to me there are two questions to address in that regard. The first is global warming taking place? Question one. Question two, is it human caused or substantially human caused or caused by something else we haven't identified? Is the argument about the science principally about whether warming is taking place or not? Or is it about who's causing it?
I think at this stage, and the science has developed a lot in the last 10 years. We know much more now than we did then. I think this stage, we would say there's a consensus that the Earth is getting warmer. There is a question about what's causing it. In fact, it may be impossible to know what's causing it. Since there are natural variations in temperature, it may not be possible ever to know what's causing it. But the steps that we would take to have energy efficiency, cleaner air, and more independence from foreign sources of energy are all steps that would work towards addressing climate change.
Go ahead.
I was going to give you an opportunity to speak about the air quality in Oklahoma City because we are on the verge of no longer being in compliance of the EPA stipulations. So discuss that and the way you see it.
Oh, it's a critical issue for Oklahoma City and for Tulsa as well. one of the things that we've always been able to talk to the outside world about, to potential industries about, is the fact that we're in compliance with air quality. We have, for a city our size, we're in very good shape. The danger is that we are very, very close to going across that line. In fact, we may be 1 or 2 hot summers away from that happening. If that does happen, it will be much more expensive for companies to locate here because they're going to need to have more advanced control technologies. So we need to do what we can to address that now. There is an effort in the legislature to try to put some money behind steps that companies could take in central Oklahoma to try to address it. And we need to move the city more broadly in a direction of being somewhat less automobile dependent. I mean, we love our cars and we drive them more than we ever have before. And so we need to work more towards a walkable city, more towards a city where there are more transit options available.
What's the principal impact on the average Oklahoman of global warming 10 years from now?
Well, it may not be 10, but within 20 or 30.
Okay.
If it continues as it is, the climate models predict that, strangely enough, actually it may get wetter here, which seems like it ought to be good news. But if the average temperatures increase, the result is going to be that there's going to be more evaporation. And so the climatologists at OU think that the result is we'll have less water in our reservoirs. And in a drought year like we're in right now, that's something for us to really be concerned about.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of water in our reservoirs, there's an issue right now before the state involving the federal government in that lawsuit for Sardis Lake. And a lot of municipalities in central Oklahoma would like access to that water. And I know you're familiar with this issue because we've worked on it.
Right.
But where is that, and what do you think ultimately is going to happen with the water and Oklahoma City's impact in getting that water?
Well, that's a very critical issue for the future of the state. Fort Worth, or the county that surrounds Fort Worth, has recently applied for a permit for more water than Oklahoma City and Tulsa and every other city in the state put together use right now. And they filed a lawsuit to try to force the state to give it to them. That is going to be, that's a very serious issue for us. It would be a mistake for the state to make any kind of a deal with another state until we know that we have enough water for our own purposes. And that's why we're conducting a statewide water study, to better understand where we are for water.
In a nutshell, 10 seconds or so, what's the other major things you're working on?
Well, water is the current statewide water plan is the most important thing going forward that we're working on, because in the next 5 years, we are going to assess all of our water resources, all of our water needs, and to shape a new policy for the state of Oklahoma for water. And that really is going to be the most important thing.
All right. Hey, Miles, thanks for coming on the show. Miles Tolbert, Secretary of the Environment for the state of Oklahoma. Kent and I'll have a final word after this.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Miles. Appreciate it.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
There's a whole new world online, but it's not always safe for kids. Never give your name, phone, address, or password to anyone you met online, and always keep your personal information private. It's the safe way for kids, right, gang?
Right. Be safe online.
Thanks to Lauren Nelson and Cox, we're working to keep Oklahoma kids safer online. For your free guide, log on now. And if you feel your child has been placed in danger by someone online, notify law enforcement today.
You need this one to get satellite HD. This one's your DVR. This one's for local channels. This one's...
What are we supposed to do with all this stuff?
Got you covered. Oh, by the way, that old satellite stuff makes a great end cable.
That doesn't look so bad, right, honey?
Don't live in satellite denial. Get the latest entertainment without the hassles from Cox, your friend in the digital age.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett and Kent Myers. We're here to wrap up a show that featured the Secretary of Environment for the state of Oklahoma, Miles Tolbert. We talked about a number of issues today, but global warming is something that is almost on the front pages nearly every day.
Well, it really is, and it's getting more so certainly in recent years than it has been in the past. I think like we talked about in the first segment, to some extent that probably is attributable to Al Gore's presentation in that regard and effort in that regard, but it's not just him. It's a lot of people, particularly in the scientific community, are telling us, look, there's really something going on here. It's time to try to find some kind of a solution.
As a news story, it has all the elements of something that has a lot of legs, as we used to say in the news business. There's a lot of money involved in whether or not it's occurring or whether it's not occurring and what we do about it or what we don't do about it. It's got political repercussions. It's got worldwide repercussions in how we get our oil and the renewable energies that take place across the country and in the farmlands and people trying to push biofuels. And then it's you've got some scientists saying that somehow we need to keep the sun's radiation from arriving on Earth. So issues that we're going to be dealing with not just in 2007 but most likely long term.
Well, yeah, it's not something that's going to go away. I think we can, at least in Oklahoma, be somewhat comforted by the fact that we have some people like Miles Tolbert in positions of responsibility to do something about it. I don't know anybody around that is more qualified to deal with this kind of a problem than Miles. And that gives me some comfort that at least if solutions that may be possible will at least be suggested and promoted on Oklahoma's behalf.
He's got his hands full. You take Tar Creek and you take the drought and you take the water issues involving Oklahoma City and perhaps the lawsuits involving the Texas communities that want the rights to Oklahoma water. Miles Tolbert he's got plenty of reason to get up and early and get to office early.
Well, he left after this segment pretty fast. He had a lot to do.
He raced out of here. Hey, we want to thank you for being a part of The Verdict. I want to remind you about Miles Tolbert's website. If you'd like to go to ose.state.ok.us, you can get more information about the Secretary of the Environment's website. And of course, theverdict.tv is our website. For Kent, I'm Mick. We'll see you next week.
The preceding program was produced by the Production Services Group at Cox Communications, exclusively for the Cox Channel.